Thanks, Philip. It's a pleasure for me being here. This is my foreign language, so bear with me. I'll talk a bit slower to think before I talk, but anyway, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I just spoke to Philip and said it's a pity that the Afrikaans culture isn't that into history as the English. Yes, a few. I mean, if I had the same presentation in Bonnievale, I will hope for 10 people. It's just, there's something missing, which I can't point my finger onto that. But I'm glad that I'm in Swellendam, which have a very active heritage community, and I appreciate it, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. Okay, let's start. Right. Just to give you a short, I'm more Swellendam than Bonnievale in my heritage. I'm part Strijgers, part Steyn, part Coetzee, part, which is in Van Eden. So that's all Swellendam surnames, and the Coetzee is there from Leeuwrivier. Just to give you an indication where I come from is my grandfather was a Coetzee, and he was born in 1896. He was the first mayor of Bonnievale in 1953. He was for years under the Swellendam, what is the right word, afdelingsraad, what is that in English?
Divisional Council. Divisional Council.
Yeah, there's the right word. That's the second one from the left and the top. And then my father was Piet Coetzee. Many of the Afrikaans people would know him in those days. He was quite a big Swellendam supporter in rugby in those years. And he was the last mayor of Bonnievale. And then I am the third generation. So Bonnievale is in my blood. I was educated as a Bonnievale. I had to take part in all the events that they did to make sure that whatever they did functioned. So yes, so that's why I'm standing here today, partly due to them. Brief background, my whole life was born around Bonnievale. 2014 I decided to come to Bonnievale, and my dream was, in 2014 my father decided to write a book about Bonnievale because he had this bank of knowledge in his head, and unfortunately his dream was cut short, and then this whole thing was bestowed onto me for good. He got all the information. He had a terrible handwriting and no references at all. So for me to start take this whole book with no references, just this is the first story, this is the second story, was a crazy undertaking, but this is now 3 years down the line. My mother is also here. Each day she asks me, when is the book finished? But it's not as easy as that, as many historians would know. So, okay, I worked in Cape Town, and I was 17 years there, and then luckily I decided to go back to my roots. You only live once, where my wife runs a guest house and I'm in a particular field. Yes, so that's enough of me. The subject, history. I call it the addictive slot machine. When I started with this whole subject on Bonnievale, there is a refrain that long in every history book of Bonnievale. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. And this is what I've started with. But it feels like you're walking with a torch in the dark, like now, basically in the load shedding. And you basically just see what you want to see. But if you can get the chance to just go off the road, there's just as much history next to that spotlight as on the actual route where the spotlight is. And that started to fascinate me. And lessons that I learned thus far without completing the book is don't give up, don't take anything for granted, for sure. Don't be afraid to share your wonderful history, and be sure nothing happens in isolation. So in my short field in history, that is the 4 points that I constantly take to heart. Short history under the before. Bonnievale didn't develop from Worcester side. It came from the Swellendam side due to Solaris and the wagon route on that side. So all the old surnames of Van Sales and that came from Swellendam side. Even the church developed out of Swellendam side. Even Robertson came out of the Swellendam side. So we're basically an extension of Swellendam in the 1700s. And then we became a route, the Bossy Pad. And then the first loan farms came into being. And then our friend Barry, I give a lot of gratitude towards that person, and he makes the whole area basically economically viable and introducing investable ventures. So in Bonnievale's short history, as I showed you or just spoken about, that 10 sentences, it starts at 1900, nothing before 1900. That means there was a barren landscape, Bonnievale, and then our magical Mr. Rick lands on the spot, and with his magical wand and his tripod with his thing, build a channel. And that was my challenge to say, yeah, but Bonnievale didn't start at 1900, there must be much more than that. Where did it all came about? Even for Rick, nobody knows what he did before that. So then I went back, and basically this is the first diagram of Bonnievale. Bonnievale is now basically there, next to the river. The first loan farm was 1743 to Mr. Van Sale. This is a later map of 1871. This one I got 2 weeks ago, so I'm quite excited. That's a further broken up piece of the original farm. Still the river, that's the lots. If you're going to Bonnievale now, you will still see that all the furrows where you get your laywater. What's laywater in English now? Laywater. Also, see, they copy us. So all that plots basically is now divided into smaller plots, and the laywater still runs through there. If you know Bonnievale, that is the NG Church. And apparently, and I must speak to Mr. Stein there in the back, there was an old railway up to there, before the original railway, which we're looking up at the moment. This is an exciting new part. Okay, more complex involvement is the best way to explain the whole Bonnievale happening, in that Frederick William Bitterly and Ernst de Wet from Zandvliet was basically the first people to see Bonnievale as an enterprise to develop it. Now, 3 weeks ago, we only had the name Ditterly. I don't know where he was born, nothing, just Ditterly. The vet was from Zandvliet, so obviously I got all the information from Zandvliet. Zandvliet borders on the northern side to Bonnievale today. In those days, Zandvliet had one portion lot, I think number 3, which is Noordale these days. So that's why Ernst and this Ditterly was in a joint venture. In 1877, they said that is a date that the government started in earnest to look at making the Western Cape water wise, where there was a lot of discussion, and the commissioner of Robertson said the great want is water. It's quite disheartening to see hundreds of acres of the most fertile soil along the Breede River lying waste and comparatively unproductive, owing to no other cause than the want of capital to lead out the Breede River, whereby the world may be placed under cultivation. These days you don't get these words anymore. It's beautiful English. But so this is not solely a private enterprise. That was political will and push by the government of the colony to have sustainable water in these regions. Right, I said I had D'Italy, and eventually in the archives I found D'Italy, who bought it in 1898 from a Mathieu. And it's strange, if you look there, he went bankrupt, which I can't prove yet, and he sold to a John Forrest, which is also a vague figure, and John Forrest sold to Christopher Forrest Rick, which we all know now, by now, in 1901. So, in 1898, the railway came into Bonnievale. Okay, now must remember, Christopher only bought it in 1901. So, if I look at the next one, I said I didn't have anything about Italy. I found that record, so it's Frederick Wilhelm Italy. He was born in 1866, 1843, am I correct? And he owned the Stark Cigarette Company in Cape Town, but I had nothing. I just Googled night after night, Italy, and obviously all the details is that German Italy, that was that movie maker. But then they landed Italy, who had two farms in the Swellendam region that was liquidated, right? I had Italy, that was the Stark Cigarette Company in Cape Town, and the Italy in Montague, that was a teacher. So that was my closest links to the correct person, but I haven't had just the surname, no names yet. And when I get Frederick Wilhelm Italy, immediately got the name, and I ran over to the archives, and I actually, 2 hours later, I sit with a handwritten letter from Italy. So that is the amazing thing, and that opened a whole new field. Here he still had the Victoria Cigar Foundry. He was born in Germany. Right, I'll get back to Italy. Government's desire to capture water. John X. Merriman, Commissioner of Public Works, published an article in 1877 for the creation of irrigational districts, bodies, and even their rights and function. Seek private sectors to initiative and investment to back them through government loans. So this was the environment that we had in those years, that the government said, come, we need to do something. You see there in the top, government desire to capture water, not state capture water. So it's a different attitude in those days. It was all for development. If whatever happened did not happen, Bonnievale would look like this area. And that's right next to Bonnievale. It's a valley just north of Bonnievale, next to Zandvliet. It's barren, there's nothing, there's no water. So it's just an extension of the Karoo Koppies. It will look nothing better than Barrydale in a vegetation. And the first attempts to get water out of the Breede River was by windmills and coal steam-fired pumps like this one. So there was enough bushes, no bloekoms yet, and they did the low areas, they pumped physically the water out of the river, as they do still today. The problem is, after each winter, all the pumps were in Bitsand, as the river came down. So, it was not a perfect solution, and it was limited. And they farmed basically just vegetables and a bit of lucerne, a magic crop for those days. And then Ditterly and Ernst got together. That correspondence I don't have yet. But they decided they want to build a channel to Bonnievale to irrigate their land. I think they bought their land for £800. And obviously if you can get water, you can triple that amount. That was their whole idea, where they say that Ditterly, before he finished the project, he bought a lot of, this is the old history now, he bought a lot of implements to start plowing and plant beetroot and all that, and that made him bankrupt. I'm not so sure that's the history anymore. That's part of that small sentence that I spoke about. Because if you go into the history and you look at between Ditterly, Ernst de Wet, John Forrest and Christopher Forrest Riek, there was a court case between all of them. So I don't think it was smooth sailing those days. It happened as it happens today. So that's the reality, and that's the nice thing about it. It is not this fairy tale. It had these little bends and stuff. Okay. Where and how? Breede River and the Kochmans River Junction. That's just north of Van Loefferen. There's a sort of a what is a weir, yeah. No, the boulder weir. There was just a natural slope in the river. That's not the right word, but anyway. And they decided that was the best place for a weir. That would result in a 65-meter height benefit, 63 meters down, 63 kilometers down in the river. So you automatically got gravity, which, remember, they don't have electricity yet. That is still 16. Neither we know, yeah? Just a thought, that channel runs today and it can still gravity feed 80% of the crops today with no changes. The vineyards and everything above the channel needs to be pumped from the river, which has no rights on the channel, but everything from the channel to the river can gravity feed in those days. So there's a picture where they're busy building it, and the interesting thing about the weir is the Kochman is salty, extremely salty, so we don't want to have that water in the channel. So they let the Kochman's water run underneath the channel, and you can see here they take out the channel which is actually on top of Kochman's. So Kochman's run underneath, a free bypass, and we catches the water out of the Breede River. So if it's in flood, the water is fresh, no problem. That was the first challenge. And then I've got all these correspondence. This was 2 weeks ago, so my whole book needs to be rewritten. Just the interesting part is this part. I'll read it to you. Just to describe the person Ditterly. This is done by a Chief Inspector of Irrigation in 1898, and he written this to the Wets, Ernst de Wet from Zandvliet. The channel was partly constructed by contract and partly by Ditterly himself. The section done by the contractor have been very fairly done, but the work executed by Mr. Ditterly appears to have been carried out in a most hurried and unworkable manner. The channel being of irregular widths, the sides not battered, the bottom on all matter of levels, and the work generally not up to the usual farmer standard. He was never a farmer. The flue being made out of wood and being insufficiently supported have badly warped and in some cases collapsed altogether. They all have to be repaired and tarred. So he wants to sell this venture of water, but his whole system is in tatters. That meant, I rather think that he went bankrupt through the venture itself, not through buying stuff, but I can't prove that yet. But the nice other letter that I've got is also, that is from a person that went to measure it up in 1897. And the interesting fact there is, he said, all the available labor at present engaged in local farms. But about at the end of this month, the wine pressing will be finished when the survey will be resumed. We all thought that the wine industry in Bonnievale only started after the Zandvliet has been constructed, because that was permanent water. That's later on, 25 years later on. And then this letter we found, which is contradicting everything, which say that there was already vineyards in Bonnievale in 1897. So that means this whole fairy tale of Bonnievale getting his permanent stuff, is that page is there out of the book. This is a map of 1902, and this shows you the government's, can you hear? This shows you the government's plan. So here you can see, here's Worcester. Zandvliet will be somewhere here in the future. And this is what the government saw as possible irrigation areas and irrigation areas in being ready. Bonnievale is basically from there to here. Bonnievale is there. They finished the first section into Bonnievale in 1900. So they started from there till 1911 for the second part. But this is what the government saw as irrigation. So this was a, more than you think, a planned exercise by government. It is not an ad hoc that let's do this and do that. I mean, there was huge sums of money loaned. I know there's one letter where Rick approached Swellenham for another loan on his project. An elephant of a challenge in 1899. This is now back to D'Italy. D'Italy started in Ernest de Wet, and they started from the Weer, and they dug the nice big channel, and it got to Olifantskrans. That's why I reference there to elephant. Olifantskrans is this barren rock facing north, and there's no way you can get around it. And what they managed to do was they built an actual, this is the only photograph that we found in 1992 in the library in Cape Town. They actually built a funnel. Is that the right word? Channel, wooden channel, what is it? Furrow. Furrow. They built a wooden furrow all along the edges, right to the channel on this side. It was 1.22 meters wide, 0.61 meters deep, and 190 meters long, and displacing 160 tons of water. Only problem in winter, the Breede River comes and it takes everything away, because everything is standing on stilts. At the top it's hanging on cables. There's one piece of stilt still hanging there today. So that was a yearly occurrence. Now the winter water, when it is in flood, it's gone. This channel only gave water till late December. January, February, March was still dry in Bonnievale. But at least it stretched the planting capacity in that time. So that was a problem year in and year out. And then Rick bought the plot. This is another example, another furrow. This is one that was explained by that one engineer. So what they did, they skipped that and they dug a new ground channel detour to make it work. As you see, it's not the cement, it was still barren soil, so there was about 30% water loss, but they worked that in. Then Mr. Rick, that is the photo here in the right hand corner, he took on the elephant in 1906, so there was basically 5 years venture. He saw the possibility, he saw that the only solution for Bonnievale is to go through this krans, this olifant krans. Now he was in a gold business, he was in the diamonds business, he was also in the brandy business, you will see that later on, which we didn't know. But he was an entrepreneur, master tactician, his knowledge of dynamite, and he had money. So he was the right person at the right time. And he started construction on the 1st of January 1906. And this is Mr. Rick standing here. And next is basically what it entails. So that is Olifant's Krans. And it's basically the tunnel is dug from there inside this krans all the way to here. He started at 4 o'clock on the 1st of January 1906. He used 2 12-hour shifts of 50 Transkei laborers, employed 2 blacksmiths permanently, and they used up for the whole project 2 tons of steel, which worked out to 2.5 kgs a day. And that's just to hammer the holes in so that he can put his dynamite sticks in, 11 of them, to blow it. The tunnel was 5 feet wide and plus minus 6 and 7 feet high, dug blind from 2 centers. So let's take this table as Olifant's Krans. He started on this side and he started from that side. Okay, now you know the instruments of those days. And then he also made a window from the riverside here and here, and he worked both sides there as well. So he didn't have to carry all the rubble all the way through the tunnel, so he had 1, 2, 3, 4 discharge points. So I walked through that channel before it was upgraded in 1992, and you walk down and up, and then where they met, you can see there was a bit of misalignment, but that makes it nice. It's still a major achievement. He used 80 bins of dynamite, he moved 2,000 tons of rock. The result is 240 meter long channel, and opened on schedule, which is a rare word these days. I don't know if it was on budget, because he loaned more money for this, but at the cost of 18,000 pounds in those days, which was quite a sum. When they rebuilt, they made the tunnel wider because it used to tend to block up. We found that hammer and chisel in the tunnel. That is at the museum at this moment. So there's a proud gentleman in front of the completed tunnel. Here's the gentleman with his pipe. And now he could market this place as a venture for all the ex-settlers. That was his market. He marketed in PE, advertiser. He basically wanted to sell small farms to ex-soldiers, marketed to Oudtshoorn, even had a guy in Oudtshoorn to sell it to the ostrich farmers there. He marketed this all year round water, which it was not. He was tested in the court for that. that he even tested the soil and gave that results in the marketing. Good climate, close to the market, and had an additional bonus of the new Vale siding that came for the railway. So everything fall into place for Mr. Rick, and this is the railway of 1901. And Bonnievale is just, even Swellingham is just lucky to have the rail, because I think in 1878 they still decided, must it go through to Montague, through the Karoo, or must it go around Swellendam? So who knows what would happen if that was not the case. Anyway, Mr. Rick immediately subdivided the town, and he had a coloured area and the white settlement area. The small holdings there was his coloured area. We call it Happy Valley, because in weekends he said that people were very happy. And this is the settlers. There is a channel running. It's not very clear. At this stage there was only two buildings visible, but that's just the extent that he went to for those years to promote Bonnievale. And then to Bonnievale in 1938, you can basically see this is lot 2 in that first picture going down. So the water was still freeing the small holdings down to the river. And as they subdivided and they subdivided, the town came into being. There you can clearly see, as from the air photo of 1943, you can still see the channel was running. Sorry, I'm standing in front of it now. It's running there, and this whole green area, it's basically 90% the same today, is cultivated. The area, each farmer still has the same amount of water as those days. The only difference is they had flood irrigation, which in the clay soil amounted to salt. It was a big problem in the 1960s. It was a huge problem in Bonnievale, the salinity of the soil. Then they went to sprinklers, and then they stretched the hectares, and then they went to drip spraying. Oh my goodness, what is it?
That's right, drip irrigation.
Drip irrigation, and then micro irrigation these days, and that means that 1 acre of water has exponentially grew to 5 acres due to the correct way of irrigation these days. So it's a better way of use, but the same amount of water. Okay, who was Rick? As I said, he came from Lindley and Barberton and Klerksdorp. He had 2 children there, Mavis and Gladys, and they died within a year. What we didn't know is he had an Afrikaans lady before that, which he was divorced from, but that history we didn't know until 1988. I'll come back to that now. And then in Bonnievale, he married Mrs. Moon from Robertson, and they had a child, Mary Myrtle. She was born in 1903. And she got, what is brainvliesontsteking? Meningitis in 1911. And on her deathbed she asked her father, remember he's now more than rich, her wish is that where she had a little garden, can he build a church for her? And it must be a sad moment. She died. And he said, okay, he will do that. And in 1921, he finished building a church. This is the only church in the world building on the request of the child. It's built to plans that's from Scotland. You can see it's a typical Scottish architecture. That is an old photo from those days. He imported the marble floor from Italy. The doors from Zanzibar. He used railway and the river stone for the roof, and there's lead on top. It's a magical little place. It was totally neglected, and in 1983 the municipality of Bonnievale restore it to its original beauty. That is Mary Myrtle, and if you, it's a bad photo, but basically she's painted there with the 7 roses depicting the years that she was old. Uncharted territory. I don't know if it's clear there. I'll try to. This is what I've got from Rick. Application irrigation loan, CF Rick, Bonnievale, Swellenham. These I still need to go in further. Rick, Post Office, Bonnievale, Cape Colony, Dairy Correspondence. What Rick did was, basically he got all, okay, he first got the settlers, they bought the farms that didn't make it, he chased them off, he resold the property to the ostrich farmers from Oudtshoorn, the Jonkers, Moeligs and Fouries. And they brought their ostriches. And around 1909 there was about 700,000 ostriches in that region. Which also helped the smaller farms was the Devil's Rope that came in after the war. This is your doringdraad these days, thorn wire, that we call it. They call it Devil's Rope in the beginning. And after the ostrich market fell, they had all these lucerne lands, but no livestock to sell. And it was within 2 years everybody had cows. That was the next best thing. And that's how Bonnievale came about being a milk producing area.
Sorry, why would the ostrich, why would that have fallen? What went wrong?
That is a bubble in the market. That's before the First World War came about, and it's a fashion. It's not for the meat, it was for the feathers. I mean, they sold a pound of feathers for, you can buy a cow in those days for a pound of feathers. It was a bubble, a huge bubble, and it just, that's a whole, it's a whole presentation on its own, the feather market of those years. I know there was, there's stages where they put metal strips into the shafts to make it heavier. There's lots of stories on the...
And that was just for fashion, the feathers?
Just for fashion. The women were crazy those days as well. Anyway, there's one story that one dealer came to the farm and said, listen, I'll pay you. I think they pluck the feathers 3 times a year. And he said, listen, I'll pay you for this batch, I'll pay you for the next batch, and I'll pay you for the batch thereafter as well. Unheard of in those days, even today, for being prepaid for okay, then publieke aanklaer. There's lots against him. Krieger, Storm. Bericht de heer, CF Riek, 1 content brandewijn over de grens heeft ingevorder, waarop geen invordering betaald is zijn deze goederen werden in de OVS gestoord. So this old gentleman was not just irrigation specialist, he also had his dark side where he exported brandy to the Transvaal over the yeah, to the Boer republics, and he was sought by that government for that. Lindley, Oranje Vrystaat, gesoek, considered deze regering daar hy Stoker heeft opgerig en nie belasting moet betalen op zijn dranken en dien ingevoer deur deze republiek. So another brandy problem. This is another good one. Okay, CFR Johannesburg regarding invoer van gekleurde werklieden vraag ter hulp van de regering. So it was weird that he used the Transkei laborers in on a tunnel, but he never allowed any those called blacks in Bonnievale. It was written in his contracts with people, no blacks in Bonnievale. I think it was until 1878. There was only one compound in Bonnievale where there was 4 black families. Bonnie people is in that compound these days. No other blacks, only colors. He didn't allow any other. Only after that. And he also said he wants to take Klerenwerken to Joburg to assist in the mines. Christopher telegram, indien hy machinery stuur na Kaap goudvelden om te prospekteer na Abelwal of I don't know what's that, goud of de regering hem de sekere mynregte sal toeken. So this was a real entrepreneur in those days. And then another one was in Kreersdorp. He also did, I can't find it yet, and Wessel Visser, a professor in Stone, was also looking into that. He wanted to do a major Fall River project there, but that was canned due to the war in 1899. And if you look at the next page, Mr. Forrest JP Bonnievale is reported to have sold to South African company property 1 million or more acres of extent in the northern bank of the Orange River in the Northwest Protectorate, which he acquired from the British company during his visit to England shortly before the war. And then there's another clip like that where he sued the British government for £1 million. That's an extremely high figure for those days. So that's a whole encyclopedia of this gentleman that we don't know yet. I only got a little stick right. We spoke about this channel, what is it all? I spoke about, okay, let's go further. Sorry, before I go to that. In 1911, he gave the whole channel to the Zandvliet. That was the farmers in the area. They established this raad, and he said he doesn't want to pay water tax and he wants to be on a board. But that only lasted for 1 or 2 years. Then this Englishman couldn't get right with the booties. And he went and he started the Bonnievale water irrigation scheme. And it was not long after then another visionary person, Coetzee came into being. He was from Robertson, and he investigated the possibility of making the whole area, having it have water right through the year. Where will we build such a dam? And he was the guy that had the vision of those days to build a dam, Zandvliet. But the problem is, where will they get the money? Because this is huge sums of money. So him and Mr. Rick had basically 1.5 decades long suffered into it, there's not a better word than that, to motivate all the farmers, not even in Bonnievale, in Robertson, to pay a water tax to get this dam erected in the future. So that is, even in today's standards, is basically an impossibility. He managed to get it right, and the dam was built and opened in 1923. He died 2 months before that. It was called in the beginning Mareesmeer, and what's weird about this dam is not in the Bonnievale River, it's next to it. So in winter it's fed by a horse through it, which comes from the mountain range, and it runs through the wall in the, what is it, the
Dam wall?
Dam wall, my goodness. Run through the dam wall into the river, and it fills naturally, I think, to 60 something%. After that, they close the sluice, and then they pump the dam and the rest is coming out of the Breede River. All the water is pumped. It's permanently pumped out of the Breede River. Then it goes to Robertson's irrigation center. There's the area, actual point where the weir is. There's Olifantskrans. So you see, nothing of this would have been possible if Olifantskrans hasn't been settled. And there's Bonnievale. So the green piece was finished in 1900, and from 1900 to 1911 they finished the second part. This yellow piece here is the old part that they cut short, the shortcut, which we want to be declared as a heritage site. And there's Swellendam. So if you looks at the scale, this length is about halfway to Swellendam from Robertson. So it's a huge undertaking, basically 100 years, more than 100 years ago now. There you can see how it goes from the weir. This is the Breede River, you can see where that goes, and basically inside that channel is all the greenery, and that's basically Bonnievale's existence. That's Rick's Tunnel there. There's the old furrow which I showed you the picture. There's Middle Rick Church. Here's a siphon that goes underneath the Breede River and comes out on the other side. There's another siphon, there's another siphon. There's 6 siphons altogether. And there's a tradesman tunnel on this old section that we want to conserve now, which is still there today. So this is a part of the old channel that we want to preserve. You can clearly see they had to make an access road to get there in those days. So there's the access road that they made, and this is a channel fully with overgrowth today. And I just want to show you this. This is just around the corner. This is now the channel starts almost 2 meters wide and 1.5 meters deep, and it ends up this big and this deep. This is about 2/3 down the line, and this is how they made. This is the most beautiful part, and you can walk there if you ask the farmer. And then this is the site which I appreciate the effort and guts for those days the most. There you can see the height. The Breede River is down there. It's not down there, it's down there. So they built this with a wall. They cut down that. It's amazing. I think this is more than 100 years back. And it still runs and takes the water through there today. Thank you.